If you're a woman who has recently been divorced, maybe for the first time, maybe the second time, and you're now realizing that the person that you were in that marriage is not the person you want to be anymore. You were keeping yourself small, you were keeping yourself afraid, and now you want to bust out of that old pattern and become the new you. But you still find those old fears holding you back. I think you're really going to love this interview with Dawn Butler today. After her second divorce in her 40s, she came to the realization that she had been letting fear control so much and so many of her decisions. And so she narrowed it down to one specific fear, which also was a huge desire for her, the desire to travel alone. She had always been attracted to the idea of traveling and of solo traveling, but for some reason she was just so afraid. It really scared her. But after she divorced, she decided, you know what? I am not going to let my fears control me anymore. And I am going to take a solo trip to show myself that I can overcome my fears. Hi, my name is Hannah, and after burning out over the age of 40, I decided to rediscover what I really wanted and reinvent myself to be who I really wanted to be. Along the way, I'm talking to other women in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond who have reinvented themselves to show me and you that no matter where you are, no matter what it seems like, you always have more options than you think. So welcome to She Reinvented. So I think Dawn's story will help you get some courage to do some solo traveling of your own, if that's something that you've been wanting to do and you've just been afraid to. And I also think her story will be valuable to you if there's something else that you've been afraid of doing after a divorce or after a big life change. So let's get into the first half of Dawn's story, how she used solo travel to reinvent herself and change her identity and face her fears after divorce. After her second divorce at age 39, cybersecurity professional Dawn Butler decided it was finally time to follow her dream and go take her first solo travel trip. How Stella got her groove back, it was not. But even if her first solo trip was a bit of a miss, she didn't give up, and solo travel was just one of the tools she used in her process of healing and personal reinvention after divorce. Now she helps women 40 and beyond who find themselves single again to redefine their dreams and reinvent themselves through solo trip planning and coaching at Courageous, Daring, Wonderful You. And today we're going to talk about her reinvention story of finding peace, healing, and self-acceptance over 40 through solo travel and creating community.
Yes.
So welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do we need to add anything else? That was just so...
Well, so I mean, the first thing I like to ask, where are you located and what's the view outside your window?
All right.
Just to get a bit of to set the scene.
So right now I'm actually in South Florida where I don't live. So I'm visiting, and it's about to storm.
Oh, nice.
So I can hear the thunder. So
Ooh.
I live in Maryland, but I'm here in
Mhm.
South Florida, and I've been here for a couple of weeks, and almost every day it rains. Like
I love that.
thunderstorms. Yeah.
So if someone were to ask you, oh, I heard you're on a podcast about reinventing yourself. How did you reinvent yourself? Or what was that about? What would be the short version? What would you tell people?
The short version.
Like a conversational version, the elevator
So I guess
conversation.
my biggest reinventions, because I've had several, I tell people that I realize now that I'm almost in a consistent transition. And so because it's so consistent, I've decided to change the word to, I think I said transformation or elevation or something like that, something less dramatic, or,
Mhm.
because transition just seems tough, right?
Mhm.
Like, oh, I'm transitioning through, at least to me it does.
Mhm.
And so I was like, I'm changing that word. It's my next phase, my next elevation,
Evolving, maybe
evolution.
evolution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because for me, they tend to do that. They evolve me into some other version, not, at my core, the same person.
Yeah.
So I would say my biggest reinvention, I think, was that second divorce that you mentioned.
Mhm.
I really don't think I traversed the first divorce very well.
Mhm.
I had even titled those years as like my years of something. I can't remember some D word that I can't remember anymore because it was just like, who the heck were you? You know,
Mm,
reeling from the whole thing. And I was like, I can't do that again. I just
mm.
can't. And so, yeah,
So
go ahead.
your first marriage was in your 20s, it
Yes.
sounds like. And
Yes.
just doing the math, your second marriage was in your 30s.
Hmm. Yep.
Then at the end of your 30s, you get divorced. And would you say that that's when the real transformation started? Obviously, we're constantly transforming. We can't stop transforming,
Yes.
reinventing. But sometimes something happens in our life, and this triggers the real phase of transformation.
Yeah. And now that you're saying it, Hannah, and I'm digging a little deeper, I don't know if it was the divorce itself. I think it was age.
Oh,
It just
okay.
so happened that the divorce was around that age when a lot of women start to think, okay, what's up in my life? Like you really start to own more of who you are
Hmm.
and not be so willing to mold yourself or pretzel yourself for something else. It's like, no, I'm at this stage, midlife, where I'm looking back and I'm like, okay, I can regret that stuff or I can learn from this stuff. And so I think it was a combination of the divorce and not wanting to repeat the same story that I had before. But also, I took a look at myself at around, I think I was almost 40 or about 40, 41. And I realized how much time had passed. It was almost like, whoa, that 8 years went really fast, right? And I looked ahead and I was just like, I got 8 more years or 9 more years until I'm 50. What am I going to do with those years?
Mm. And what was the first thought when this moment, you're already divorced at this point, when you have this thought,
Right.
when you're thinking about this, what ideas came to you?
What were the things that I did not do in my 20s and 30s because I was married?
And what were those?
Travel was a big one. I'd always wanted to travel the world. I always wanted to see it. Like it started nurturing itself in my teen years. I did travel some in my marriages, but not to the extent that I wanted. And again, there was this clock, and it wasn't the maternal clock, the one with the babies. That wasn't part of it at all. I wasn't concerned about that because I still was on the fence about children. I don't have any children, everybody. And so I didn't have that going for me as much as a lot of people do. And so it was almost like, ugh, I gave these years of my prime to these husbands. What about me?
We don't have to go into detail, but how were you feeling at the end of this? You just came out of 2 marriages. Is there some part of your self-worth as a woman, or
Oh,
just, I mean, bad
definitely.
relationships take a toll.
Yeah.
What was your mental state like at this point? Let's say we're going back to like around 2014, 2015, right after your divorce.
Mhm.
What was your mental state like,
So
personally,
interesting,
in your life personally, and also in terms of your career?
so interestingly, my mental state after the first one was worse than after the second one.
Okay.
Because in the second one, I started to look back and realize the things that I didn't do to heal after the first one. And so I started working a little bit on trying to, I'm a very spiritual person. I believe in God. And so in that second marriage, while it was tough, it wasn't as tough as the first one. It was challenging. I I started to reconnect with my spiritual self more.
Mm,
And
mm,
so when the second divorce happened, which I didn't really want, but I could sort of see like the forest for the trees, like this isn't working out, We're not happy. And I'm also a very realistic person. And so I'm like, we're not happy. And I don't want to make someone unhappy. Like, if you're unhappy, I don't want to be the source of that for you. And so the way it worked out is I moved to Dallas and whatever, and it broke down, or we just divorced. But at that point, spiritually, I was a lot stronger.
mhm,
And so I leaned into that a
mm,
lot more. But I did have a lot of ideation about being a failure. I really
mhm,
did. I remember talking to a coach about it. She was like, "You're not a failure because your marriage has failed, Dawn." But I felt like I was.
mhm. Were you the one, and you don't have to answer, but are you the one who instigated the divorce, or was it a mutual decision? And
So
if you were, how hard was that? Because that's a hard choice to make.
it is. The first marriage, I instigated the divorce completely. And it took me about a year or two to make that decision, but I did consult with him.
Mhm.
I asked him, like, "Hey, do you think we can do this? Because it's two people. This is not a one person thing here." And his answer was like, "I don't know," or something. And I'm just like, "What? You're in this too with me. How do you not know?" All right, dude, I'm going to the lawyer. We're gonna get separated. You have until the separation to figure out if you want to do this or not.
Mhm.
The second one was more back and forth. So he would talk about divorce. I'm like, what do you mean? But in the end, I was the one that filed because I'm more of an action person.
Mhm.
And when I make a decision for my life that I think I've taken time to like assess if this is working for me or not, I take action. And I don't
Mm.
like it sitting around languishing. And we languished for maybe 5 or 6 months after it sort of broke down. And he wasn't taking action, so I did it.
Mm. And that's when you moved to Texas or to
Moved
Dallas?
to Texas a little before that. So it was the
Before
move
that.
to Texas that really pushed it. We
Mm.
were already on the precipice, on the
Yeah, but
edge.
but you moved by yourself to Texas.
I did. He was supposed to come after, and
Okay.
I'll be honest, Hannah, and what I'm saying to you in the audience, he knows because I said it to him. I just felt so much more at peace.
I was gonna say, what was it like? Because it sounds like you're kind of on your own now for the first time in almost 20 years, finally
Was
living alone, probably feeling a little bit free. What was that like? Take me back to this sounds like the beginning of a new era. You're in Texas, you're on your own, you finally decided you're gonna divorce. What was that like?
it was strange because Hannah, like this is so good because I don't think I even went this deep into like where it really, really started, you
Mhm.
know? I just knew that I was at peace and
Mm.
I didn't want to have someone in my life that constantly disrupted that peaceful feeling. Like they couldn't go for a certain amount of time without creating contention.
It's
And
exhausting.
and at the time too, in our marriage, I was on a very stressful job. So I burnt out twice in my career. The first time was in that second marriage. I was working 12 to 14 hours a day, weekends. I also did my master's at the same time. I don't know.
That's crazy. That
Yeah.
is crazy.
And so,
And you
all,
were a technology professional in
yes.
cybersecurity,
Yeah.
technology, cybersecurity, and your
I wasn't in
master's
cybersecurity then, but I
okay,
was the tech. Yeah.
in the tech world.
Hmm.
And what was your master's in?
I did an MBA. Yeah. Yeah.
How did you survive? I guess by getting divorced.
We got divorced
Cutting dead
after
weight, cutting as much dead weight as you
We got
can.
divorced after I graduated. I'd already graduated by the
Okay,
time we got
okay,
divorced. But I
okay.
think I do know that that added pressure to what was already difficult.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I do talk to people about that, like when they're thinking about coming into tech. Now my situation is not the same as everyone else's, but I do let them know. I know people they've lost their marriages because of these jobs.
Yeah.
And that can happen in more places in tech. If we're not being careful and we're putting our priorities in the places where they probably shouldn't go, right?
Mhm.
Humans do that.
Yeah.
Your marriage can be at stake.
Do you
And
think your job was actually a factor in your divorce?
oh, I absolutely do.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was. I mean, I'm not saying it's the primary factor, but it didn't
Mhm.
help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So around this time or a little bit later, you had wanted to travel your whole life. You kind of put it on the back burner while you were in these marriages. At some point, you get the idea to take a solo trip. How did that idea come to you? And, many people, by the way, have taken solo trips since
Yeah.
they were kids. So maybe this won't be super important to somebody, but to somebody who hasn't really traveled and you had traveled, but you hadn't taken a solo trip like this, it sounds like this can
Right.
actually be a big deal. So
Yeah.
I don't, any listener, don't poo poo the idea. If you've solo traveled a lot, by the time you're 35, some people, I have a friend who she still has never traveled by herself and she's
Yeah.
afraid to do so. So
Some
it can
people
be
haven't been
really
on a plane.
intimidating.
Yeah.
So take me back to before you actually go on this solo trip and what was going through your mind and what were your thoughts about this?
So you're right. I had traveled by myself before. I'm from the Bahamas originally, so I've been on a plane by myself. I
Mhm.
went to college in the US, so I did back and forth, college, home, home, college.
Mhm.
And for work, I had traveled by myself on a plane. So I had done it, but I had never solo traveled for leisure purposes.
Mm.
So that's the difference. I'd done it for work, which is different. You're there for a reason, right? You're going to a conference each day, you're going to training every day.
Yep. Things are
Solo,
organized for you. You don't
yeah,
have to organize your own itinerary. Somebody
right.
else has already done it for you.
And there are going to be people who are expecting you
Hmm.
to be there, right?
Hmm.
So that was one of the key differences for me was this idea of going alone on a vacation
Just for fun.
just for fun.
Yeah. And
And
what were you hoping? Were you having a kind of fantasy about, Eat, Pray, Love / How Stella Got Her Groove Back? Because that obviously you just
that's what you see
divorced.
on
It's
TV.
completely normal. Were you having these ideas?
I did not.
Okay.
I was so afraid. I really was. I was very afraid. Um, I think that was most of it. I
What
was
were you
very,
afraid of?
I don't know, the unknown, getting kidnapped, just all the things you see on TV.
Okay,
The
that's pretty funny because your first solo trip was to San Francisco. So where were you traveling from?
Hannah, I didn't
Sometimes the mind is not logical. Sometimes the mind is
know.
just not fear is definitely not logical.
So I lived in Dallas at the time.
You lived in Dallas at the
And
time. So how did you get the idea for San Francisco?
so
Why?
I had joined these travel groups on Facebook. This is before groups really became a thing like they are today.
Mhm.
And there were people in these groups talking about buying tickets when they go on sale and, basically making the most of this travel by spending the least amount of money you could. And so I started to sort of tap into that idea of book it, book the plane deal. And San Francisco had always been a place I wanted to visit. Let's put this out there. I'd always wanted to go there. Every time I take one of those little assessments, like where should you live in the world, San Francisco came up because
How come?
I love moderate weather,
Yeah.
and San Francisco has it.
Mhm.
So it was on my bucket list. Oh, and by the way, during that little time, and I started to realize, okay, what are the things that I haven't done that I
Mhm.
really want to do? I started creating a bucket list.
I love that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I did, and I would just add to it as my memory like my memory would say, "Hey, you wanted to whitewater raft. Remember that?" And I started immersing myself more in the travel groups. I read more articles. I signed up for little newsletters. And so I immersed myself in this thing that I wanted to do. I'm a techie, and that's how we learn. We just research,
Mm.
research.
That's how I'm not a techie, but that's exactly what I do. I have to just research the heck out of something, and then I can kind of start to absorb it and think,
Right.
okay, maybe it's possible
Lots
for
of
me too.
info.
Maybe it's possible for me.
So I clearly didn't research San Francisco well enough. But
Oh yeah.
I booked the flight because it was a really good deal, and I
And at this
chose.
point, you are. I'm just sorry, just to
It's
interject
okay.
so people get an idea. At this
Mhm.
point, you're about like 41-ish,
Yes, I
40,
was about
41-ish.
41.
So you're
Mhm.
just kind of fresh out of a divorce, and this is going to be your first solo trip for personal pleasure
And
only.
by the way, this could have been a factor too, I had been laid off the year before.
Oh wow.
In my 40th birthday year, I'd been laid off, and so the trips that I wanted to take with friends and things like that, I had to cancel.
Wow.
And so I think this was almost a little bit of a do this something special for yourself,
Mm,
you know, push yourself type of thing and enjoy
yeah.
yourself as well.
Well,
Yeah.
this adds another question in case somebody's in a similar position. Did you maybe they just got laid off and maybe they want to take a trip? How did you budget for it, or how did you think about it financially? Did you know that you had enough to take this trip and then not be employed for a while?
Look, the trip was after I was reemployed. I couldn't
Oh, okay.
the year I was unemployed, I couldn't push past the idea of
Got it.
going on trips, and it
That
bugged
makes
me
sense.
because the travel bug had already been planted in me, and
Yes.
that year I couldn't do anything I wanted to do because 'cause I'm
Okay.
like, "I have all of this time, and I don't have any money."
That's annoying. That's kinda like you had your personal COVID 1.0 or something, because that's how we all felt. We couldn't travel, we couldn't do
Yes.
anything during COVID, and then finally travel
Yes.
took off. So when you
Right.
finally could, you're like, "I'm going for
I
it."
didn't care about the money at that point.
Okay,
I
well,
mean,
that's good. So that's good
yeah,
to
no,
know.
I didn't. I was like, "Ah, whatever." Like, it was almost like, how people, when someone passes away, we all say, "Oh, you just never know what'll happen. We should all maximize each moment, maximize each day." That's the attitude I had after That one
Yeah,
year. I was like, "I'm
yeah.
doing it. I don't care." I didn't.
You
I
just got
was
divorced, you were laid off at 40,
yes,
I mean,
it was a
it
lot.
was it was a lot. You
A
just got your
lot
master's
happened.
degree, that was a lot,
I had moved to Dallas,
and you had moved. That's
wasn't
like
supposed to
4
be there on my own.
huge life changes in the space of what,
Huge,
1.5 years? That's a
huge.
lot.
And I didn't say that I also had to give a house back to the bank during that
Oh
time.
my gosh. I don't necessarily believe in astrology, but sometimes I wanna ask people, "Did you look at your astrology chart to see what was happening?" Because sometimes there's just these times in our lives where so many things
They're
happen.
rough. Yeah. So, that was all mixed up in there, and I just
Mhm.
really I booked the San
So,
Francisco thing. Go
I'm
ahead.
so sorry to interrupt, but I'm really curious, what was your mental state like? Were you in a positive state, or were you kind of was this weighing on you?
Uh, I won't say that the year of unemployment was easy. I had moments of depression.
Mhm,
I did. But I mentioned earlier that I'm a believer, I have faith. So that kicks in
mhm.
those moments. And I started to really, if you want to say, look for the silver linings or whatever it is, like I was like, I can't stay here. I have this lust for life
Mm,
that there's
okay.
more this moment. And I tell myself, Hannah, when I'm going through difficult situations, I've been doing this for probably since I was in my 20s. I pause and I say to myself, Dawn, in a year's time, you won't be here. Because that's just the truth. So, and then the other thing I tell myself, I used to tell myself a lot when I was younger, is like, God knew you'd be here.
Mm,
So,
yeah. So
you're
when you were getting ready to take this trip, you weren't in a state of depression
no,
or
no, not
you
at
were
all. I was
okay,
excited about it, but I was
nice.
afraid.
Okay.
But here's the funny part. This is a total novice move. I picked a random date on the calendar that worked for me, booked my flight, and then waited a while and started to try to find accommodations. And I'm like, why is everything so expensive? I had booked my trip Mother's Day weekend.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
That was my first novice traveler move. I was like, "Jeez, don't."
Oh, man. Ah, and this is when you're looking for hotels, right?
Yes.
Ah,
It was
yes.
crazy how expensive it was, and
Yep.
yes, I said I was sort of like, "I don't care how much it costs," but I had just been laid off. So
Mhm.
it
You don't
was
wanna
like
be paying double the price if you don't
right,
have to. Yeah.
right. So I ended up with the Airbnb. I don't know how I made my decision on where it was located. I probably did some research, like, in
Mhm,
terms of, like, what areas are the ones that are okay to stay in. I normally do that, and so I felt moderately good that I would be safe.
mhm,
Um, and I arrive in San Francisco, I get a Lyft. This is when Lyft was first starting. I hated Uber back I still do. I still am more
mm,
of a Lyft person.
yeah.
And, um, and I'd read about the subway in San Francisco, and people were like, "Well, maybe you shouldn't. It passed through some neighborhoods." I'm like, "Okay, I'll take a Lyft. I'm not doing the subway." I'm a scaredy cat. I always tell people I'm an island girl. I'm a
Mhm,
heart. I'm from a tiny little dot on the map. I don't know what city life is like. I'm not a city girl.
mhm.
So I get to the Airbnb and I can't figure out how to get in. That's the first part. Oh shoot! And I remember the Airbnb was called something like the Hideaway. That's what it was called, the Hideaway. So Hannah, I get there. I see some homeless people on the street. That was sort of concerning for me.
Mhm.
Not realizing at the time that homelessness is just prevalent in San Francisco. I learned this later, but it makes me a little, you know, should
Yeah,
I
it's
go back outside at night? I'm starving. I'm hungry. It's getting dark. And I hid away in my Airbnb the first night. And I had crackers, banana, and peanut butter.
not a glamorous Instagram post.
Not at all. And it's ironic because, like I said, I realized I was writing in my journal. I looked at my journal for that trip recently, and I wrote this Airbnb is called the Hideaway. It's exactly what I'm doing. But I didn't feel too bad about it. I felt safe. I felt peaceful,
Mhm. But
right?
when you first got there, because this is your first solo trip on your own, I would be thinking, "Okay, I have to have some amazing experience.
Yeah.
I have to make some this has to be
Yep.
transforming in some way." And then reality kicks in, and sometimes it's just not it's just not that great. You want to stay in your hotel, your Airbnb more than you want to go out. You feel like
Yes.
you should be seeing every site, but you just don't have the motivation to do it. Is this, I mean, this can be a very disappointing experience. Is this kind of what you went through?
Yes, it was. It was mixed.
Mhm.
I am a very persistent person, a determined person, so I was like, "Okay, you didn't come all this way to sit in a room.
Mhm.
Like, get out there and do something." And so there were moments when I did that, but I faced so many crazy stuff. Took the bus going the wrong way, went the wrong way up that big old hill that you need the trolley for or something. So
Oh
I
gosh.
was constantly walking up those hills in
Well, they're
San
everywhere in San Francisco,
Yeah.
yeah.
Google had me going the wrong direction. I was like, "What is this?" Because Maps at the time was, like, in beta. It's not as good as it is today.
Mm.
And, so I think it was almost like a trial by fire,
Mhm.
like, "Do you really want this?" type of thing. People kept staring at me. I stayed in the Mission neighborhood, and I did walk around there, and I found really good restaurants, like little small mom and pops, but people kept staring at me. It was so strange. It's
Hmm.
like, "Why are they staring so
They could just
much?"
feel your vibe is different. They could feel you're not from San
Maybe. I
Francisco.
don't know what it was,
Yeah.
Hannah. I can't yeah, maybe they're like, "She's a tourist." So,
Mhm.
but I did write in my journal that I was
Mhm.
bored.
You were bored. So your first solo trip for fun, you were bored.
And I don't
And
get bored easily.
and what's funny is later you actually have a guide for women
I do.
to plan solo trips,
Yep.
but this easily could have been so disappointing for you that you thought, "You know what? Solo travel is just not for me."
Yeah.
That's clearly not what happened.
Nope, not at
But
all.
what were you thinking after this trip? Were you like, "Well, gosh, that was a dud," or "Next time I have to do it better," or something else? Like, it sounds like a slightly disappointing experience.
It was, I was very thrown by seeing so many homeless. It
Mhm.
put a damper on my feelings because I felt sorry for them.
Yeah.
And, and so I say when I tell people about that trip, that's the thing I remember so much because it
Mm.
just besides, once I got past my fear and I met a lady who explained it all to me and I was like, "Oh, okay." It just made me sad.
Yeah.
I was just like, "It was a good trip, but it's so sad to
Yeah.
see it everywhere," you
Yeah.
know?
It is sad.
So maybe that part was why I didn't stop. Yes.
But you now coach women on how to plan solo trips. What did you do wrong with that first trip? What could you have done differently to have made it a better experience? Let's say that you, from that time, Dawn, from
Mhm.
2016, is your client now. How would you have helped her have a better experience to San Francisco?
I would start by checking the calendar and see if it's a
Okay.
holiday.
Okay.
Because truth be told, if I hadn't been in that Airbnb and at a hotel, I might have had a different experience.
Okay. That's the location, location, location. Hugely time and like date and location, very
Yeah,
important.
yeah. I think
Mm,
that would be the major thing. I mean, technology has gotten so much more advanced now than it was back then. I don't think people have as much to worry about in terms of like getting turned around, going on the bus the wrong way, all the little fun things I experienced, that during that trip. Um, and the one thing I think that I do tell people, and I think I do this intrinsically a lot now, is I do that little extra piece of research. I join, back then I didn't, but now I find a local Facebook group
mm,
or a local something to get into and ask people questions about the location. I didn't do that back then because I didn't know it existed. So
mm.
that's one of the huge things that I do that helps me a lot when I go to a new place. I ask the people that live there, like,
Yeah.
I want to stay in this area. What do you think? What are the pros and cons? Access to public transportation, all these things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you decide to take a solo trip abroad. This hasn't deterred you. You're like, okay, I'm still going to do this. This wasn't the most amazing trip that I maybe envisioned, but I still want to travel. I still want to have this solo travel experience. And tell me about your first solo trip abroad.
So I decided, Hannah, because it was such a dramatic experience, that first experience, I thought maybe I went too far too fast. Like they say you have to crawl before you walk. So maybe I walked and I wasn't ready. And so
Mm.
I decided that I was going to put myself on this sort of project plan because I
Nice.
was a project manager
I
in
love it.
tech.
I love it. Every time someone talks about being a project manager, applying it to daily life, I love that concept
I was
because
giving myself a phased approach. So that's what we do in tech. We phase
I love
things
that.
in.
I
And I
love
said,
that.
all right, I will travel with a group first. So I'll go where I'm going by myself. I have no problems with airports and airplanes on my own. I've been doing that for decades. And I
Mhm.
will meet up with a group. So that
Mm.
trip went pretty well.
And where was that to?
That was to France.
Oh, that was to
And
France.
that was to France.
Wow.
And it was,
Okay.
but I still had a lot of fears.
So tell
Like,
me about this French trip. This, I mean,
let me tell you how
the
good it
double
was.
side of travel that I think that we're showing, and this has happened to me as well. There's the double side, the absolute amazing joy of travel, but then you set yourself such high expectations that if you don't have some amazing trip every single second of the day, you feel disappointed in yourself. And I think that's
Yeah.
important to
Oh,
recognize. I really do.
absolutely. I did learn over time, and I had a colleague that helped me with this because I used to struggle to for me to feel safe. I don't when I travel alone, I don't go out at night.
Okay.
And I started to feel funny about that. Like, geez, you go so far and then you only go during the day. And she said, Dawn, if that's what makes you feel comfortable and makes you feel safe, why do you feel bad about that?
I think it's extremely smart. As a woman traveling solo, that is one of my tips and tricks.
Yeah.
I don't drink alone. I don't actually drink anymore, and I don't
Mm,
go out at night. And
yeah.
that just takes you percentage wise. That just lowers your risk percentage so much
Right.
just by not going out at night and by not
Exactly.
drinking. Boom.
Yeah. And what I started to view it as my time in the hotel at night is my relaxation part of my vacation because I have really active vacations. I get out during the day and I'm walking and I'm seeing and when I come back I get to binge on TV, read a book,
Yeah.
and it gives me that balance that I want from a vacation. And so I've sort
Mhm.
of learned to customize it for myself over the years through
Mhm.
trial and error, of course,
Mhm.
and being okay with me
Yeah.
like, this is who you are. You don't
Yeah.
have to look like anybody else, how they did it. Because people
Yeah.
would be like, "Oh, I turned up." And I'm like, "I don't wanna turn up." I just wanna
Yeah.
see a historical site,
So
learn
important.
something.
I mean, I have a friend, for example, she was traveling, she was planning her trip to Mexico City, and I had already been there, so she's asking me tips and tricks. But it was funny because all she wanted to do was go to museums, and I'm like a one museum per trip type of person. She's like wanted to go to 5 museums per day, and I'm like, but that's awesome. She was so happy. I'm like, if I were to go on this trip with her, I would be so
You
unhappy. I would be so burnt out. She was going to like 3 museums a day. Like all she wanted to do was go to museums, and like
Mhm.
you just have to do what you want to do. You just
Yes.
have, if you love museums, go to all the museums. If you don't love museums like me, I just want to walk around the street and like eat tacos and sit at cafes.
Yeah, see all
That's
the
fine
culture
too.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's putting pressure on ourselves to supposed to do something because this is how
Right.
you're supposed to do it. That can
Yes.
just ruin the fun.
It does, it really does. So
Yeah.
France,
Yeah.
I'm introverted,
Mhm.
right? And so and a little shy, even though I'm trying to give up saying that because I think it's gone. I think I've
Mhm.
overcome that about myself. And so I was really concerned about the social aspect of going
Mhm.
into this group of people that I did not know. I get
Was
on
it
the
a
plane.
was it
Mhm.
just female or was it a mixed group?
It was mixed.
Mixed, okay.
It was mixed. I found out there, of course. It's just I just signed up for the trip because they had a free single supplement. 'Cause
Oh,
you know, when you travel by yourself, they charge you a single supplement in a lot of cases, and I'm like, "It's free." I love France, and I was going to the south of France, which I had never been to. It was a
mhm.
great deal. So,
Yeah.
everyone, if you're not hearing what I'm saying, I travel by the deal. Like, "It's a great deal." And it's a place I wanna go to? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so I had all this trepidation, these concerns about the social aspect, and, I get on the flight from Dallas to Atlanta, and there's these twins. There's a twin, 2 ladies, and I noticed them because they're dressed alike, and they're adults, and I was like, isn't that sort of weird?" But anyway, they get my attention, and I end up in Atlanta airport, and I see them again. I see them multiple times, and finally, I see them on the flight from Atlanta to Paris, and they're sitting behind me, literally right behind me on the same flight. And I'm like, this is interesting. I like to see the meaning and find the signs and things. right? One of the twins, her name was Dawn. I was just like, come on,
How
this
funny.
is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's almost like the universe, well, in my case, God is like, yep, this is where you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they were sweet. They literally sat right behind me. So we talked about the trip and whatever. And we get there and everything goes well. And everyone is so nice, Hannah.
Hmm. Okay.
So nice. Like, they're like, are you okay? They're checking on me because they knew I was by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And made sure I got on the bus and we all got together because we found each other somehow looking for our ride. And the whole trip, everyone was just so nice. And I remember that first day writing in my journal, everything that I was afraid of didn't happen. And from that moment on, I started to change my expectation when it came to travel and the people that I would meet.
That's the end of this interview so far. If you want to watch the other half of this interview or see how another woman reinvented herself over the age of 35, you can click on this next video here or on the playlist there or in the description box below. And please let me know, how would you reinvent yourself? Please write your answer in the comments below. And if you like this video, the number one way that you can say thanks to me is to hit the subscribe button and then hit the thumbs up button for this video.